Hello everyone, welcome back. If you're new here, I am Molly and I do book content here on YouTube. And today I am here to do my, what month is it? July wrap up. I don't know how, but that's where we are apparently. I have my list of my books, I have my physical books. I have quite a few to get to. I ended up reading technically 11 books because my 12th one I did actually only finish a day or so ago, and it's like the 5th of August, but I'm counting it to my July reads. So please do excuse me for that. I will tell you what that book is when I get there. I'm going to quickly go through the books that I didn't get to, and then we'll go on to the books I read. So they're not in any particular order, but the first book that I didn't read in my pile is The Dark Lady by Carla. So I didn't get to that, unfortunately. Then we have My Husband's Wife by Alice Feeney. I didn't read that, but I will be carrying this over into August. And then the last book I also did not get to is Fourth In by Rebecca Yarros. I will also be carrying this over because this is also part of my summer passport to summer reading thing that Chantel's doing. I didn't realise though that August is the last month for the whole summer passport summer reading, and I still have, not including the books on my TBR, I still have like 4 or 5 books, not including these two and what's on my TBR. So that's great. But there we go. We'll just have to manage. But yeah, that's all of the ones I did not get to. Let's get into the books I have read. I only wrote down a couple of the books in here, in my reading journal. The rest I'm just going to have to remember. So that's fun. So yes, they're in no particular order. I'll probably go through my readathons and yearly challenges after talking about my books. So the first one on my list is the 3rd book in the Freddie and Grace mystery series, The Juliet Code by Pepper Basham. And this is a Christian historical mystery. It's book 3 in the series, so they're kind of individual mysteries, so you don't have to necessarily worry about spoilers, other than you might see characters from other books, certainly obviously Fred and Grace, but sometimes you'll be seeing other characters. You don't see any of them in this book, but I think in the next book we will be in the Highland Heist, and maybe even the one that's coming out soon, if not already. But yes, I gave this 5 stars. Love this book. Again, it's a great mystery. It's funny. There's some faith content. The mystery was really good. In this one, there are some missing paintings, and apparently there's a code which is called the Juliet Code because all the paintings are all from Romeo and Juliet, but different scenes from that play, and basically there's a code in those paintings that no one has figured out, and apparently there's some like hidden treasure that the creator of those paintings hid, and so you can have 2 mysteries in one, or maybe even 3 because there's murders as well. So yeah, it was really good. Great for the summer as well because they're in Italy, so it's very much that sort of summery sort of vibes in Italy. I mean, there's not too much about it in that respect, so it's not necessarily one you necessarily have to read like you would with a Christmas book, unless you're doing Christmas in July, I guess. But yeah, so it's not a big deal if it's not a hot weather or cold weather. If you want to feel like you're in a hot country in the cold weather, it doesn't really matter in that respect. So yeah, but I really enjoyed this. I get it. I didn't completely get it. I got parts of it with the mystery, so that was cool. The next one on my list I did actually listen out to it on an audio, but on audio on, I think it was Spotify. But I do have it physically, so that's cool. And that was Head in the Clouds by Karen Wittemeyer. This is another Christian fiction, but this is a historical one set in Texas during the 1800s, I think. Yeah, late 1800s. Well, not late 1800s, sorry. 1883, so early 1880s. And this was really good too. I gave this 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. There were funny bits, there were lots of really sweet moments, some sweet romance, there's mystery going on as well, which was cool, because the main character, Adelaide, I think, Adelaide, she goes to be governess for this young girl who's, I think she's like 5 or something, and she is adopted by the father figure, Gideon, who she is looking after her. And basically the little girl called, what's she called? Isabella, I think. Yeah, Isabella. She had an uncle in England who isn't very nice. We gather, but we don't know much about him. And basically he's trying to get Isabella's inheritance. So he's kind of trying to go after Isabella, but you don't really get that till about maybe about halfway through the book. You kind of get a bit more of it, but you do get the odd like little chapter or little snippet from the uncle's perspective, which is really good because it made it less jarring when he suddenly turns up, because we know something's happening, but we don't know what or why, things like that, or necessarily why. So yeah, it was really good. I really enjoyed it. The romance was nice. This did have a little bit of a content warning because Adelaide, the main character, it doesn't go fully, but there is a SA scene, or an attempt at SA, assault, not abuse, by one of the workers who works at Gideon's farm. So just be aware of that. It does kind of go into it, but nothing gets far enough. It's more the violent bit more than anything else. And again, it wasn't graphic. She does get saved before anything can happen, but yeah, just be aware of that. Otherwise, there's no other content. There is a little bit of shooting and stuff like that. But again, not massively violent and injuries and stuff, and again, not necessarily graphic. But just be aware, if you are sensitive, those things are in there, including that scene. Just be aware of that. Otherwise, it was clean, there was no issues. There was some faith content as well, which was lovely. I'm really enjoying Karen Wittemeyer's books. They're really good. Then the last one that I wrote down in my reading journal is an audiobook. I don't have it physically. And that was My Killer Vacation by Tessa Bailey. And I have complicated feelings about it. As a whole, the book was 4 stars. I can definitely see why people really like it, and I did enjoy the mystery aspect. As the title suggests, it is a mystery. This woman with her brother goes on vacation. I can't remember where, but basically the owner of the place they were renting, kind of like an Airbnb sort of thing. They end up finding his body when they first arrive, and so there's like a murder investigation, and this bounty hunter is basically comes to try and find, solve the mystery basically. And so the main character, the woman, she is kind of joining in because she likes mysteries, so she wants to try and solve the mystery. She's also using this as an excuse to kind of reclaim herself as a more confident sort of person, I guess, kind of. I can't quite describe it, but she's always thought of as quite timid and stuff like that, and she wants to kind of prove, people that she's not. And so basically it's kind of about that as well, why she wants to join in. And so basically there's a romance between the two of them. It's Grumpy Sunshine, Now here comes the bit with the romance. It is explicit. I didn't really know that going in. I wouldn't have read it otherwise. But yeah, I wouldn't recommend it for the majority of you who watch my videos. All of you are very similar to me. You don't want to read spice or sex scenes, stuff like that. So I wouldn't recommend it. However, the few of you who might be okay with that, you might like it. It seemed well written from what I could tell, but as a whole, I mean, it wasn't massively, I wouldn't call it it's not like when you're reading a classic and they're considered really good. It's not like that sort of well written, but it was fine. It did the job. Yeah, and it was funny at times as well. But yeah, it was a bit cheesy as well, particularly at the end. But yeah, so it's not like the best book in the world, but it was good. The mystery was good and the comedy was funny, and outside of the explicit scenes, the romance was good. I liked the characters and their dynamic, but don't recommend the explicit. In no particular order, I'm going to continue these books. I've not been able to do my reading journal, so I've not updated it. So we are just going to have to play it by ear, sort of thing. I do have my bullet journal where I have written down the basics of, title, author, and star rating. So I can definitely look at that, but otherwise I don't really have anything written down. So I apologise if I forget anything. I did forget one book. So this book is a non-fiction, this book that I finished. I didn't get to finish it in June like I wanted to. This was part of Anne's summer reading club. I can't remember what she called it now. But she did a summer school reading thing for How to Read a Book by Mortimer J. Adler and Charles Van Doren, in this version anyway. It's a non-fiction based on, as the title suggests, How to Read a Book. And Anne from In Search of Wonder, she was doing a summer school group read where she and a load of us who wanted to join in were reading How to Read a Book within July. I did not finish it in June, sorry. And yeah, I didn't finish it, which I suspected would happen, especially after I got to part 2. So yeah, I finished this in July instead. I gave it 4 stars. It was really, really good. I dogged pretty much every single page. Yeah, and I basically underlined or highlighted pretty much everything. There was a lot for me to learn, which is why I did that, because my reading is very surface level in terms of school. We did what we needed to do in school, and then it was kind of just left to our own devices sort of thing in terms of learning how to read a book. We never really learned how to read a book to this sort of extent. It is mainly focusing on non-fiction. He does go into a little bit with other fiction books and different types, so like epics, like epic poetry, like the Iliad, the Odyssey, as well as just general fiction, as well as other types of books, as well. Yeah, and then also it goes into other types of non-fiction as well, so things like philosophy, history, other practical books, as well as other things. It goes very in-depth, and I would say it is definitely more for people who read more non-fiction, such as students. I wouldn't say it's very useful for those of us who want to go deeper in the fiction books, especially if the fiction book is like maybe a classic or epic poetry. Whilst he goes into it a little bit, it's more the same things you would do for the non-fiction, essentially, or certainly with the basic rules of what to do, which is useful, but it kind of wasn't as useful as I was hoping, because I specifically read this because I wanted to go deeper with the Iliad and the Odyssey in particular, because they are epic poetry, and obviously they can be difficult text to look at if you're not looking at an abridged version like for kids or something. But yeah, it was still really useful. It's definitely worth a reread maybe, Saying that, will I get around to doing that? I don't know, but I would like to, because what I would like to do is do tabs for specifically things I want to look at more often, because obviously it was more general, like things that I found interesting, even if they weren't useful for me personally. So yeah, it was really good though. It's definitely great for non-fiction, including reading the Bible as well. But so yeah, I did enjoy it. It's really interesting. I did find it quite heavy going in terms of the writing, because of how quickly we were reading it, because we were trying to read it in a month. So for me, a non-fiction in a month can be usually quite difficult if it's this sort of typical size. Because obviously a lot of it is quite wordy. It wasn't hard to understand necessarily, but it was just a lot for me to take in, especially part 2. I did struggle with that, and I started to get behind with that. And from then on, I was just behind for the whole rest of the month, which is why I only finished it in July instead of June. But yeah, it was really good though. I really did think it was very interesting. And for those of you who are interested, it was probably worth a read. Yeah, I did really enjoy it though. It was good. It was interesting. The next book on my list is actually another non-fiction, interestingly. This one I did start a lot sooner, and actually I did read it partly in the way that they said to read in this book. And that was like speed reading type thing, skim reading. And that was Uncomplicated by Hosanna Wong. This is a Christian non-fiction. The subheading is Permission to Enjoy God in Your Unique Way. And this is basically the author, Hosanna Wong, is talking to kind of lots of different people who are Christians and the different ways they kind of interact with God, how they worship, stuff like that. And basically all of the unrealistic expectations that we have in our walks with God, how we can think it has to be done this certain way, and if I'm not doing it this certain way for whatever reason, then I'm doing it wrong. And, whether that's either you used to do it this way, and now, because of the way your life is at the moment, you can't do it in that same way anymore, or you see other people doing it a certain way and you feel less than because you're like, oh, I can't do that, I've tried it. Or even if you've not tried it but you've heard it and you think, oh, that's intimidating, I can never do that, sort of thing. It's definitely useful for those of you for people who do feel that way. You might find it useful. It was not quite what I expected the way it was written. I initially thought it would be more like interview style. If you've read The Case for Christ, I kind of thought it would be a little bit like that, where it was kind of like an interview, but it's not really like that. It's more the author really, and then having little snippets of talks with people. It's all mostly, I'm not sure how to describe it really, but it wasn't written like an interview basically. But it was definitely good. There's also some activities for you to do to kind of, I'm not quite sure, but yeah. But it is interesting. I think a lot of people will get a lot out of it. I gave it 3.5 stars because I found it wasn't really beneficial for me personally, which I was aware of when I bought it, but it sounded good. And I basically speed read it, and I felt like that's all I personally needed to do. I didn't need to really read it thoroughly, if you know what I mean, like word for word. I kind of skim read it and stuff like that, and then some bits I read properly. It certainly would do that, and I think it's the sort of book a lot of people would really appreciate and feel not alone in. I didn't need it. I find I learned all this early on in my faith walk, which is a big blessing. So even if I have the odd little moment where I might feel that way, I quickly am able to kind of discard that, because I know that's not how it works. But not everyone has been blessed with that, so if you do struggle with that, you might find this book really useful. I enjoyed it, and I thought it could definitely be useful for people, just not for me personally. Okay, the next one is a ebook, and that was the book Native Patriot by Peg Thomas. Again, this was a Christian book. It's Christian historical fiction, and it's set during the American Revolution. You're following two people, I don't think they're real people, but they'll be based on what people would have been like in those days. One of them is Mark, who was from a Native American tribe, but I can't remember what the tribe was. But when he was a child, his mum kind of left that tribe. I think they were all killed off by a different Native American tribe, and so basically they left. They ended up becoming Christians and living as Quakers. They became Quakers, and so he is Quaker. And then you follow this young woman called, can't remember her name, but she is not Christian, she's not Quaker, nothing like that. But she came from Boston, I think. And she basically joins this these group of people who are with the army at the time, like civilians, and she goes to work with them, helping out, doing things like cooking, making sure the bandages and stuff like that are clean for them to use when people are injured, stuff like that. And you're basically following them both and their experiences with the little bits of the war at the time, as well as obviously their relationship, because it is a romance. There is definitely some faith content, some lovely faith content. There's you do get a little bit of the battles and wounds, but very mild, not graphic. There is a character who tries to, nothing happens, but he is definitely in a mild way in terms of comments and talk about hanging around this woman, a man who has nefarious intentions towards her in terms of sexual things. But nothing actually ended up happening. She is protected by Mark, as well as another woman who is older. She has like an adult son who you don't really see much, so there's no love triangle in that respect. Who is, I think she was Polish, something like that. And she protects this young woman, so then she's safe, which is lovely. There was definitely some lovely generational relationships between older kind of female mentors and the sort of younger young adult people. So both Mark and this woman are kind of like between 18 and like 21, 22, so they're quite young. And yeah, it was a really good book. It was really interesting seeing what it's like living in a camp in that way. It was really interesting seeing a character, the young woman, she struggles with being in the hospital ward type of thing, because she doesn't really like all the screaming and the blood and stuff like that, and that was really interesting. You don't get much of that, but usually when you see characters, they're usually all into the whole hospital and caring for people in that way. So it felt like a nice change that she wasn't able to do that and helped out in other ways, like cooking, cleaning like bandages and stuff like that, and all of that stuff instead of the actual hospital bit, which I do enjoy as well. But I think you get that a lot in that sort of fiction, or like even like World War II fiction. So it's really nice to get a different sort of activity, I guess, for lack of a better word. I did really enjoy it. I gave it 4 stars, I think. Yeah, I gave it 4 stars. I thought it was really good. Yeah, I haven't really got much to talk about that one. It was really interesting seeing the war and stuff. I don't know if there was any real people, characterizations of real people in that book, other than mentions of Washington, George Washington. I don't think we actually see him in the book, I don't think, but there are mentions of him. But other than that, I'm not sure if there was anyone else who was supposed to be real. I think there might have been actually. I think there was quite a few, because there was an author's note about the historical note at the end, and I think actually there were characterizations based on actual people, which was cool. So yeah, I did really enjoy it. It was really interesting. I actually heard this book through Bethany, I think. Sorry, I'm kind of new to her, but she hosted the Red, White and June Readathon. So it was a recommendation by her, because the book's on Kindle Unlimited. If you have that, so it's free. If you're interested. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was really good. Thanks for the recommendation. I think it's Bethany. I'm sure it's Bethany. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Yeah, okay. My next book is The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. Finally read it. It's only taken me about a year. But there we go. That's not too bad compared to some of the books I've bought and not read yet. So, but we won't talk about those. But yes, I finally read The Hobbit last month, in July, anyway. Yes, so this was like one of the first books I read. I actually read this quite quickly, considering how long I thought it would take me. So I started this on the 6th of July and finished it on the 10th. Yeah, on the 10th of July, so it took me about 4 or 5 days, which for some people is probably quite a long time, because it's essentially about a week. But for me, because of what I've heard of the writing, because he's quite descriptive and maybe even a bit flowery, I thought it might take me a bit longer, even though it's not actually that big of a book. But I read it quite quickly. I really enjoyed it. I'm sure you all know what this is about, even if it's just a little bit. It's fantasy with Christian allegory, and yeah, it's basically about this type of character called a hobbit, and his name is Bilbo Baggins, and he basically gets recruited by this wizard called Gandalf to join this troop of dwarfs, whose leader is Thorin Oakenshield, who is the rightful heir and prince of Erebor, I think is where they're going, or at least to the mountains of Erebor, stuff like that. I can't remember the correct phrases. They're going to Erebor. They were basically dispossessed by a dragon called Smaug, who now lives in the mountain there, where they kept all their gold, because obviously dragons like their treasure and gold. And basically he's recruited as the professional burglar, which when you read the start of the book, has nothing to do with how he lives his life. He is very much not really a burglar, and so, but he gets recruited anyway, and he goes on this adventure with them, traveling all throughout a lot of Middle Earth. They meet elves, they meet orcs, they meet this guy. I don't know what he is, but he's like a shifter, like a shapeshifter. He shapeshifts into like a bear, and I think maybe even a bird, an eagle. I'm not sure. But anyway, yeah, they go on adventures. It was really good. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was amusing at times. I think, yeah, it was funny at times. There was lots of adventure and action. And I get what people mean when they say it's got Christian allegory. There's definitely, I don't want to say Christian per se, more Jewish, which people might think is might consider anti-Semitic in a way. But the dwarfs definitely are very reminiscent of what you learn about Jewish people. They're very much, they like their gold in that respect. Kind of like the dragon. And yeah, and they're very reminiscent of the Israelites in the Old Testament. So not necessarily the Jewish people these days, although obviously they are considered to be descendants of the Israelites. But yeah, they're very much like complaining a lot, which if you've read Exodus, it will sound very familiar. And yeah, there was definitely a lot of Christian stuff in it. even though there's not really any mentions of God or even a fantasy variation on God, even, you know, like some people have allegory on a God in a fantasy world, but it's supposed to be the Christian God, but they use different words. Like, nothing like that I've noticed is really like that, although there are definitely themes to do with that. I don't know. But yes, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really good. The descriptions were lovely as well. I understand what people mean by that first sentence in The Hobbit. Is a good first sentence. I can't remember if I said this before, but I don't really pay much attention to the first sentences of books because it's just the first sentence. I don't expect. I usually read the first sentence and then just continue on. But yeah, the first sentence in this was actually pretty cozy, to be fair. I really enjoyed it for a first sentence. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really good. I don't know when or in what format. I am interested in Lord of the Rings. Those page counts absolutely scare me, okay? I'm not even going to lie. Not even just because the page counts, but also because he is known for his flowery language. And I'm not going to lie, I love that. I do love that stuff. But sometimes it can feel a bit like I'm being bogged down by it. And it just makes me tired and not want to read. I didn't get that with this book, but to be fair, this book is a lot shorter. So, yeah. But I did actually find, which is quite funny, those typical internet things, I got suggested on YouTube this video and also this channel of audiobooks on YouTube, and I think they're kind of really based for like sleeping, but I've not tried them. I don't know what they're like, but they basically have all of the Lord of the Rings books as well as other books, and I was like, I wouldn't have to pay for them, although I do like the idea of Andy Serkis, but I am interested in trying out those as an audiobook. So I might do that at some point. I don't know when, but I've subscribed to that channel, so unless that channel gets taken down, I will try and do that maybe, and see what they're like. I don't know what the audio will be like or what the voice will be like, but yeah. But I really enjoyed this. I gave this 5 or 4. Yeah, I gave it 5 stars. I really liked the films, so I did watch the 3 films after this, and I do like the differences they've made in the films that are different in the book. So in the book, you don't get much of the action that you get like in the battles like you do get in the films, and you don't get the point of view of Gandalf in the book. So Gandalf disappears, and because you're mainly following Bilbo, like, the issues I have, they make sense in the book because you're following Bilbo and his point of view. So obviously if Bilbo's not with Gandalf when Gandalf goes away, he won't know what Gandalf is doing, so we just stick with Bilbo. So, you know, and then also there's the battles with, you know, the orcs and the other dwarves and the elves as well, and you don't get much of that in the book because something happens where Bilbo isn't involved in the battle, and so you don't see it. And I was kind of sad about that, but at the same time it makes sense, because if you're following a point of view and that point of view for whatever reason isn't involved in, say, the battles, you're not going to see the battles. So you kind of get told what happens in vague terms, because obviously you're not going to get all those details. And, you know, you get to meet some of the characters, you know, at the end of the battles in whatever states they're in after the battle, because obviously, you know, it does vary. Try not to spoil things. So yeah, I was kind of sad about that, and that is what I really liked about the films, is that you do see more of the battles, and you see what Gandalf is doing during the Hobbit and the dwarves and Bilbo, you know, going, say, in the forest or wherever it is they're going, and then you see Gandalf doing what he's doing. So I did enjoy the movies for that. because also in the movies, because of that, you do see characters that you see in the Lord of the Rings films. I assume you see those characters in the Lord of the Rings books as well, but I'm not sure. So it was interesting seeing the differences, because you also don't see people like Legolas in this book, or at least there's no mention of him. That doesn't mean he's not in it, he's just not named. I have no idea if we actually do have met him in this book, but you do in the films. Same with the films with Galadriel, you don't meet her in The Hobbit. So it's very interesting seeing the differences, but I really enjoyed both. I don't think I necessarily prefer one over the other, because I like them for different reasons. Like, I love the book, but I also love the films, because you do see those other points of views in the films, and you do get more of certain scenes because of those other points of view, which you don't get in the book. So I did really enjoy both for those reasons. So I finally read that classic. It took me long enough. I know. Okay, the next one is another audiobook, and that is I think it's book 3 in the Nevermore series, and that is Hollow Pots, The Hunt for Morrigan Crow. And this is by Jessica Townsend, and I gave that 5 stars. Fantastic. The audiobook itself was really good as well. I love, in this book series, if you've read the audio, you listen to the audio, you'll know what I'm talking about. Usually, like at the start and end of the book, and usually after each chapter or something like that, there's a little bit of music, and I love that because it just adds that extra magical and adventurous feeling to me when I listen to it. At least that's what I get from that music. It just makes me really excited, like I'm watching a film, and it's just fantastic. I think, and I can't believe I'm saying this as someone who loves books, but if you know the Pages & Co series, I think Nevermore is better. I know. If any of you know the Pages & Co, it is literally a bookish book for kids. It's about book wandering, where some characters can wander into books and become a part of the book. Literally, every book lover's dream. Well, I assume. And yet, I prefer Nevermore. So, I'm not going to talk much about Hollow Pots because it does follow on from book 2. It's basically a continuation. She's going back to school. It does actually start at Christmas, so you do get a little bit of the Christmas stuff, which was quite kind of funny listening to it in July. So I did unintentionally kind of join in with Christmas in July, but not really. It was only a very small amount, and the rest of it wasn't very descriptive in terms of the weather and the season. So even if it was wintry, it wasn't talked about enough for it to really matter. So other than that first bit with the Christmas celebrations, you wouldn't necessarily know when it is, so it wouldn't matter when you read it. But if you do want that extra Christmassy feel, it's a great book if you do want that, for the start. But yes, it was really good. I can't really talk much about it, but it carries on with, Morrigan learning more about her powers. That's basically what I can really tell you. But I really enjoyed it. I want to start book 4. I had technically started it, but I ran out of audiobook hours on Spotify, so I had to stop. So yeah, but I'll continue that sometime. So yeah, that is Hollow Pots. The next one is, so the next book I'm going to talk about is Strange Pictures by Uketsu. And actually, before I read this, I'm going to drink my Coke. So, Uketsu. This is a Japanese book, as I'm sure you can probably assume. This is translated into English from Japanese, and it's as the little title suggests there, it is a chilling Japanese mystery. And it's definitely that. So I've also heard people say it's like a mystery horror. And I would say a chilling mystery is more accurate than horror. It's not horror. I would say it's more of the horror that you get when you think, oh, someone's been murdered. That is horrifying. That is the horror bit. It's when things like that are happening. There's no horror in this. It's all just mystery. So you do get a little bit of that suspenseful feeling because there's a mystery. But like it's not like a different book that I'm going to talk about, which really is that sort of thing. So yeah, this is a mystery, and it's just fantastic. I I don't want to talk too much about it because I want you to go into this pretty blind. So you're following a few different characters. You kind of have like the initial sort of, not build up, but you see these two characters talking about this mystery, and then you kind of follow these other people, and you're kind of figuring out why are you following these people. And that's all I'm going to say about it, because just the connections you find in this book are just amazing. Okay, like, did I get some of those things? Yes I did, but you see, I loved that. I love being able to get it, not like so it's so easy, but it was just really cool. I really enjoyed it, and that's why I don't want to say too much. But basically, I'm going to tell you what it says there, because that kind of says it. It says what needs to be said without revealing anything, really. So, what it says on the flap here is, a series of drawings made by a young woman before her death. A child's disturbing picture of his home. A desperate sketch made by a murder victim in his final moments. Each contains a chilling warning. Each reveals a terrible secret hidden in plain sight. Just, that's all you need to know. Just go in with just that. It's so good. And you do get pictures kind of in with the book, so you get some pictures there and stuff like that. So it's kind of like puzzles as well as like seeing some of like the different drawings of different things there. And you do get some more on the end pages of the drawings as well. So there's some of them, and then the other half are on the back. Just read this. It's so good. I want you to read this book. Now, it is non-Christian, secular, mainstream, whatever word you want to use. So there is some swearing in it. Not much. It's not loads. I can't remember if the Lord's name is used or not. If it is, it's not very much. There's not really much content in it other than the murders, really, and even they're not as graphic as some books probably are. So just be aware of that. I would say it's pretty mild, really. I would say you could probably read it even if, well, I don't want to say even if you're sensitive, because I don't know how sensitive you are. Only you know yourself. But you might like it, you might not. That's all I can really say. I found it was quite mild in that respect. It was definitely suspenseful. It was definitely chilling. The mysteries were just amazing. Love this book. I read this in 24 hours. Well, within 24 hours. I read it in a day. And I specifically say 24 hours because I technically finished this at like 3 in the morning. Because it was that good. But I started it that day, kind of before the next day. You know what I mean? You know, like I started it on a Wednesday. I finished it on 3 a.m. on a Thursday morning. So like, you know, it was a day. I'm calling it a day. But yeah. It was so good. I really recommend this book. If you're into reading mysteries and you don't mind a little bit of that sort of murder content and maybe the odd bit of swearing, I would definitely recommend it if you're okay with that. Because it's very mild. I would say there's no content. There's no sexual content either, even though there's couples. I think there's one couple, but like there's not really anything about their relationship, so there's no content in that way that you need to worry about either. So yeah, really, really recommend this book. I loved it. If you've seen my book haul, you'll see that I've also got the second book. I don't know if it's really a series or whether it's just they're connected because they're mysteries and they have the word strange in them, but they're not actually connected, if you know what I mean. I'm not quite sure, but either way, I have Strange Houses, which is on the back there. So yeah, I want to read that soon. Love this book. So good. The next book is another Christian book, which is great, Christian fiction. That is Nova, book 1 in the Star-Lord Legacy, or as it says there, episode 1. This is by Chuck Black. This is, as I'm sure you can probably tell, sci-fi, and it's more Christian. It's more Bible allegory. So I don't want. It's not really spoilery, but I also don't want to tell you what it is, because I kind of enjoyed not knowing what the allegory was and figuring it out through reading the story and seeing what could connect to the Bible. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really good. It is sciencey, so there were definitely things I didn't know, but I love sci-fi anyway. I grew up on Doctor Who, so even though I don't necessarily know all the sciencey things, I still enjoyed it. It was slower to read because of that. I still gave it 4 stars. It was really good. I think some people might prefer it as an audiobook, because I have loved some sci-fi books, but they were on audio, so that might be why I enjoyed them more, because they were on audio, so it's kind of like watching a film. So even if I didn't understand, I still understood enough to follow along with the story, which is the same with this. I still had that with this book. I really enjoyed it. It was really good. I would say it's probably more YA. The characters are kind of like in like a school type of setting, so they're probably more like 18-ish. I don't really know though. There's no indication of the ages, but that's the sort of age I'm thinking of, or maybe even like 2021. So yeah, really good book. I want to continue with the series. There's mentions of like officers in like, you know, not armies, although there are armies, but more like patrols, officers on patrols, treating people badly. There's mentions of that and mentions of battle, and there's like battles and fighting, stuff like that. So just be aware of that, but there's nothing graphic. It's not, I would say it's appropriate. Obviously if you're sensitive, I would say you might be okay with it, but it depends, again, like I said about Uketsu's book, it depends on how sensitive you are. So, you know, you can only, as I'm going to always say, only you can really judge how capable you are at reading a certain book because of how sensitive you are. So just be aware of that, I guess. But it's a short book. I don't know if all of the books are short or whether they vary. But anyway, I really enjoyed this book. It was really good. And the covers are just, I just love that cover. Look at that cover. I mean, that's what drew me in. I think I saw Celestia talking about this, and the series, and when she would, I would see the covers and I'd be like, oh my goodness, they are gorgeous. So yeah, I'm really happy with that. Really good book. Okay. Then the next one is We Used to Live Here by Marcus Cleaver. I found out how to say his name because Lauren and Ben from Young and Restless, they went to I think it's an author convention, I can't remember now, but they were like horror, sort of thriller, sort of authors. And they actually met Marcus Cleaver, which is really cool. And he told them how to say his last name. And he said it's a very German last name because you say it Cleaver, like the W is a V. So now we all know, if we didn't know already. I don't think he's German, but I think I evidently must have had German ancestors or family members. So anyway, this is horror. This is adult horror. I would say it's not as scary as some adult horrors are, but if you're sensitive, you're probably not going to want to read this. I really enjoyed this. It was kind of a mix of horror and mystery, kind of like Uketsu, but I would say this leans more in the horror than the mystery, although it's a good amount of mystery too, but there's more horror basically. And this is basically about this couple who bought this house here, kind of like an old mansion type of house, kind of in the middle of nowhere, sort of. They kind of have like neighbours, but they're like a 10-minute walk away. So they're kind of on the cusp of that, sort of in the middle of nowhere, but also having neighbours. And they buy this house a few months ago, in terms of the book, and they are kind of fixing it up, / maybe contemplating tearing it down. And one day, this is set in the winter, so just be aware of that. But one day this family knocked on the door, and apparently the father used to live in this house when he was a child, and he asked if they could have a look around because he wants to show his family. And basically things happen because of things like that, and yeah, it's basically in the little not catchphrase, but little bit here, it says you let them back in, you shouldn't have. And yes, it was really good. I really enjoyed it. It has Morse code. I'm gonna kind of show you, but down here there is Morse code there, and usually pretty much at the end of each chapter there is Morse code, and you have to figure it out what the Morse code is. It doesn't tell you, well, it tells you something, but not massively. Anyway, it doesn't. I'm not going to talk much about that. I just really enjoyed that mystery aspect. It was really interesting, creepy. Not really any jump scares, but definitely some scary moments. Definitely a lot of mystery. The Morse code was really cool. I do want to warn you though, if you don't know Morse code, I don't know Morse code. I looked up on images like Morse code, like the alphabet. Just be careful which one you look at, because I accidentally looked at one that had one letter for certain that was incorrect. And so a couple of them right near the beginning were a bit weird. They didn't make any sense. And I was like confused. And then after the second time I was like, it looks like it's supposed to be this letter, not the one I have written down. But I wasn't 100% sure. And I basically through logic, essentially, I was like, yeah, no, whoever did this picture definitely did the wrong letter or the wrong Morse code for that letter. So just be aware of that. Just double check if it's correct. I don't know how you would do that, but maybe look through all of the letters and make sure the Morse code is different for each one, maybe. Which is what I should have done, but you know, I got there in the end. It was correct in the end. So yeah, I don't want to talk too much about it because there's a lot of mystery, and if you're interested in this book, I want you to kind of go into it kind of blind. So yeah, basically things keep happening, with just weird things occur. There's just stuff, and I don't want to talk too much about it because I like going into things pretty blind, especially if they're mystery or there's adventure, or even in some of the horrors like this one, you know, if there are like twists or things that are really interesting that I didn't know about until a certain point in the book, I don't want to talk about them. I kind of want people to be the same in that way, that you don't know what's going on. So yeah, I enjoyed this book. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it for everyone. If you don't mind reading some horror, mild horror, I would say, then you might like this book. I would say there is swearing. There's no sexual content, no, which is always good because sometimes that can happen in horror and thrillers, certainly in films. So yeah, that was really nice not having to read that. There is a lesbian couple, they're the couple who bought the house, but it's not really about their relationship. So if you're into that or not into that, then you will either like or not like that. It's not really about their relationship, really. There's little bits about that, but it's mainly about the mystery and scary things that are happening with the house. So there's no sexual content or even any romance, really, I would say. The nearest is that one of them kisses the other one on the forehead. That's about as romantic as it gets in this book. So yes, I do want to say, and I see this so much in secular books, there are a few religious themes in this book. The family who knock on the door, they are Christians, or at least the wife is. She is a born again Christian, you find out. The man apparently was from a Christian home. I can't remember what they said. It might have been a Catholic, or I might be making something up and getting something else in my head. But either way, from a Christian home. He's not very Christian, but she is. And the kids are, well, they're kids, so they're probably not really that into it themselves. And there are a few little, like, words or phrases that you can often associate with religious things, especially Christian, but I'm sure other religions as well. But this does mainly focus on, well, not focus, but it's Christians that the characters are, so, you know. And also one of the women in the couple, she is from a Christian family. In fact, both of them might have been. Certainly one of them was, but she kind of walks away from the faith. And as usual, it's basically negative connotations to Christians, and one of the women in the couple, she is quite antagonistic. She reminds me of someone that I've had in my life, stepmom. She's very much like that as well. Very kind of antagonistic, sort of just not very nice, really. I didn't really like this character, and that character's called Charlie, by the way. I can't remember who the main woman is. One of the women is kind of like the main character. I think it's Eve, ironically. So Eve is kind of the main character, essentially. But her partner, Charlie, is the one who's very antagonistic. She's more outgoing in that way. Eve is quite anxious. There's a lot of stuff about anxiety in here. Eve does have an anxiety disorder. It's mentioned she used to take medication, so it sounds like she doesn't anymore at the time of the book. But anyway, so she's very much more introverted and not as outspoken, whereas Charlie is. And so Charlie kind of likes to pick fights with people, especially because Charlie is very, I don't want to say logical, but Charlie is very dismissive about kind of the more supernatural things and things like ghosts, you know, religion, especially Christianity, certainly in this book. Nothing else is mentioned, so certainly Christianity. And it's just, I always find in secular fiction, it is always negative stuff about Christians. And I'm not stupid. Christians do vary. There are people who are very much what Christians should be, and then there are Christians who say they're Christians and are very much not very nice and not very Christian. And so, you know, I'm not opposed to having, you know, realistic representations of the fact that some are not great and some are. But the problem with secular fiction is it is not every book, because I've not read every book, but all of the books that I have read from non-Christian authors, or at least non-Christian perspectives about Christianity, or even people who've walked away from the faith even, because I'm sure there probably have been, but it's always, if it's not written in a positive way, it's always negative. Whereas there's no sort of mixture or accurate showing of the fact that, yes, some are horrible and shouldn't really call themselves Christians, in my opinion. And then there are some who are great, but you never get that mixture. You never get that showing of the fact that, you know, not everyone is nice, but not everyone is bad. There are ones who are nice, who are, you know, what you would think a Christian should be. And it annoyed me. I just rolled my eyes in just exasperation, because, like, of course, here we go again. Christians being portrayed negatively again. And even though it's not a main theme, it does crop up a decent amount of times in this book. I wouldn't say it's a main theme, but it's enough. It's there. You know it's there. It crops up a few times. So, yeah, it frustrates me, honestly, because as a Christian myself, like I said, some will be and are like this. There are definitely Christians who say they're Christians, and when you look at how they live, you think, you don't seem very Christian. And whilst I am always of the opinion that you are, at least you're supposed to change throughout your life as a Christian. You're supposed to work on yourself with the help of God and the Holy Spirit to change into more and more perfection up until you're dead. And when you will be truly perfected in heaven. So, I'm not, it's just this, you never really see anything like that, or at least you never see any positive portrayals, and that just annoys me. It didn't annoy me enough to hate the book. Like, I still gave it a 5-star because it was a fantastic book, because it's not the main focus. Like, the horror moments are not to do with Christians, if you know what I mean. So, like, some horrors are based on that. They're very, maybe demon possession sort of thing. So, stuff like that. Like, that's not the kind of horror this book is. So, obviously, when you see all that, then obviously you'll get more of that. You'll probably get more of the Christian faith, either portrayed negatively or not, in a book like that. But that's not what this book is. But yeah, it just frustrates me and exasperates me because I never see a positive portrayal in a non-Christian book, and I think it's very inaccurate. Like, I'm all for, showing that not all Christians are Christians, but you don't need, but it's in all of the, well, not all of the books, but all of the books that I've read that do show Christians, it is always negative. There's never positive. So it just really annoys me. But yeah, I did really enjoy this book. Yeah, the Christian stuff is mild. It's not really the main focus of the book. But yeah, it was really good. I enjoyed the mystery aspect and all of that. Talking about that, there was one moment that I did kind of think was probably not 100% accurate, but more accurate than a lot of things that I see with Christian stuff in a non-Christian context. And that was when Eve, Shadow talks about, because it's from the past or it actually happens, but she has had or did have in the book a dream about the fact that she dies and goes to the gates of heaven and sees Jesus there, and Jesus is in basically hippie clothes, like tie-dye t-shirt, whatever, and says, depart from me, I do not know you, essentially. And that's probably the most accurate Christian thing I've seen. Now, not the outfit. The tie-dye thing, Jesus is not and was not a hippie. Yes, he went against the Jewish leaders of the day of, the Jewish religion in the New Testament, but he was not a hippie. He was actually very much the opposite in that respect. But I did find the whole depart from me because I do not know you thing accurate, because that is what will happen. It's, you believe in Jesus, you believe he's real, that he's the Son of God, you have belief in and on him, and because of that you are to have a relationship with God. You pray to him, you talk to him, all of that stuff. And, a lot of people who will, sadly, who will say they're Christians, they will end up having that sort of experience that she talks about, where they will well, we don't know how that will happen, but, they'll say to God, I did all these things in your name and things like that, and he will say, depart from me, I do not know you, because it's not about what you do, it is your relationship with him. It's about that. And that was probably the most accurate thing I have seen in a non-Christian book about Christians. Which is a weird phrase to say, but it's what it is. That was probably the most accurate thing about Christianity in this. So I like that. Right. The last book of the month is also another classic. And that is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I have read this before. Yes, I read this last year as an audiobook, and I really struggled. I find the way classics are written, I don't know how to describe it, but it's very much you are being told what's going on. You are not in the story, if you know what I mean. Which is still what I found with this book, to be fair. But because of the way classics are written, I found, for me, with having someone who has hearing problems, a lot of it kind of went over my head because I didn't hear what was being said, of what was written. And yeah, basically I I can't remember what I gave it initially. I think it was either a 3.5 star, maybe 4. I can't quite remember. But it was low enough, and I knew from my experience of what I read that it was probably not accurate, because I couldn't hear what was going on. I didn't know what was going on. I read this book, and there were things I didn't even know that when I read this book the second time that were in the book. I had no idea. Like how Elizabeth kind of likes Wickham. Like there was a possible romance between them, and I was like, when was this in the book? I don't, that would have been read out loud to me in the audiobook. Did I know it though? No, I had no idea. So, yeah, really enjoyed this book physically. I think I prefer it physically. I gave it a 5 star. I know all of you Pride and Prejudice fans will be like, yay! Yeah, I agree. And, yes, I did enjoy this a lot. I'm sure all of you know what this is. It's a historical romance. Kind of second chance as well. It's about Elizabeth Bennet and her family. You get a lot of character studies, a lot of different characters, get a bit of comedy. There's definitely some sarcasm, especially with Mr. Bennet, the father. You get some great changes in character with, you know, Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth. I really loved it. I really like Mr. Darcy. Yeah, and I liked that he changed as well. Yeah, and Mrs. Bennet is quite funny. She's very overdramatic. I definitely think, you know, I think I remember this being a little bit hearing it. I think this Jane Austen did quite a bit of satire with the way society was in those days, certainly in this sort of people with some more money than the majority of people. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. And also this book has illustrations in them, and I really enjoyed the illustrations. There's one there. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. It took me a while to read though, because I started this on the 25th of July, and technically I finished this on the 5th of August. Yeah. So yeah, it took me just over a week, getting on for 2 weeks. I find I am like that with adult classics. Like children's classics, it varies. They usually, depending on what's going on, they're usually a bit quicker because they're for kids. But certainly more adult books like this, it just takes me longer to read because there's a lot more in it. There's a lot more descriptions, stuff like that. So it is a bit of a slower read. But I did really enjoy it. I'm really glad that I gave it a second chance. So yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I also loved the cover as well. I mean, that cover's gorgeous. This is some of the Wordsworth Classics ones. I don't know when this version of Wordsworth Classics came out though. Okay, I think this version of the cover is from 1993 apparently. I could be wrong. But yes, I really enjoyed that. I thought it was a really good book. Glad I gave it that second chance. And I have realised that there was actually a readathon going on in August that I could have used that for. But it's fine. I'm using it for July, so I'm not going to count it. So, now that I've talked about all my books, let's talk about what I used them all for. So I'm going to start with my yearly challenges and go on to my readathons. So, the first yearly challenge is the Read Your Bookshelf Challenge, and for July it had a map. And the book I was originally going to use was Fourth Wing, because that does have a map, because, you know, fantasy, they usually have maps. In the end, I realised I was never going to get to it in time, so I decided to use We Used to Live Here by Marcus Cleaver, because there's a map at the beginning. There you go. So, I mean, it's not, you know, it's not the most interesting map, but there are definitely interesting things in the map. You know, with all, like, the different, like, you've got some notes, like, here and stuff like that, and, like, directions. So it is very interesting when you know there's, like, a mystery about, you know, the house and stuff. But, yeah, I used this for as a map instead. The next yearly challenge was Christian Fiction Challenge by book nerd Katri. did not read a book to fulfill any prompts for that. Because I only have one prompt left, and that's legal drama, and I didn't read any. I didn't do anything for that one. Then for the Jurassic Reading Challenge by Cheryl from Candlewick Library, technically there's 2 I could have done, but I didn't put them in my Instagram posts. So I actually, or at least I don't remember if I did. There's definitely one that I could have done for June, that I didn't do at the time, and that was the Juliet Code by Pepper Basham, because the prompt was water, and there's definitely scenes of water, because not only are they in Venice, in Italy, which is, you know, the city that's on water, and there's also a scene where they're in the water, so it also counts for that. But July, there was a stubborn character, and I think I forgot, because I literally just uploaded about it today, but I thought about using Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen for that, because there's definitely stubborn characters in this. So yeah, I'm going to use this. I don't know though, because I've not put it in my Instagram, but I mean, not that it matters, but it matters to me. So I'm not quite sure. Yeah, I'm not quite sure. I might use July stubborn character for something else in August, but we'll see what happens with that one. Okay, then we have Anne from In Search of Wonder, her reading the Classics edition, and for July it was red, white or blue on the cover. I didn't read anything for that. There was also June's one that I also have not done, which was set in USA. I have not done that either, so we'll read those. The next one is Katie from Paperbacks and Ponytails, her Read with Winnie the Pooh challenge, and I also have not done anything for any of those prompts, so we'll leave that. The next one is Alma from Alma's Book Journey, her Journey Through Time Historical Fiction challenge, and for July it was the American Revolution, and I used Native Patriot for that one. Then we have Oshina Reads Co. for Read Christian Romance Challenge, and I used the prompt Dual POV for two points of view, and I used the Juliet Code by Pepper Basham for that one, because you do go between Freddie and Grace's points of view, so I used them for that. There's also her Fancy Rivers Read Along, and for July it was And the So Far Blue. Did not get to that one. Then we have Kat from Cat Stories for her Biblical Reading and Retelling Challenge, and I have been reading from the Bible for that one. And for July the prompt was name, and I went for the Paul's letter to the Romans, because Roman in our modern day is a name that people use, but it's also the name of people from Rome. From, you know, the city of Rome, Roman, so I used that as well for that thing. For name, I'll get there. So let's see. So we do have the summer challenges that I've been doing. So let's quickly go through those that I've read. So the first one is the Passport to Summer Reading Challenge that Chantel is doing, and the ones I have done are Country, which was the Juliet Code, Journey, and I used The Hobbit for that. Then I did Home, and I put Pride and Prejudice because I used it because Pride and Prejudice is set in England, and that's where I am from. Did I finish any others this month? No. So those are the ones I did for the Passport Summer Reading Challenge for July. There's some I did the previous month, only one really, and that was the 5-word title, and that was As Sure as the Dawn. So I still have to read Flowers, which was Shield of Sparrows, Water for My Husband's Wife, Wildlife, and I changed the book for that, for Wildlife. So initially I used Fable by Adrienne Young for Wildlife, because I wasn't sure, and I know it's set kind of on the sea or partly on the sea, so I was like Wildlife, Sea Life. something like that, but I wasn't sure about it. But I was told that I could also use Prince Caspian from the Chronicles of Narnia series. So I'm going to use that instead. I have not read that yet, but it's on my TBR for August. I still need to read Trees, and that was The Darkling Bride. Books, and I used the book What If We Met in a Bookstore, so I still need to read that. Then I have Sun, and I used Never by Tessa Hastings, a Peter Pan retelling, and there's a sun on the cover like a sunset, so I used that. So I still have to read that. Still have to read Summer, and I used The Thorns Remain by, I forget, I can't say the person's first name. It's spelled JJA. I'm not sure how you pronounce that, but their last name is Hardwood, I think, if I'm remembering that correctly. That's on my August TBR as well. And then Wings for Fourth Wing, which obviously I'm also going to read in August. So those are the ones I still need to read. Then I have the Roll Your Next Read one, and that is by Lindsey from Lindsey's Little Library and Sarah from Sarah's Nightstand. And I will have fulfilled a few prompts for this. I read 2 classics, The Hobbit and Pride and Prejudice. Romance, I've read a few romances. Backlist, definitely. Travel, yes. Island, yes. Blockbuster, definitely, because you could use The Hobbit or Pride and Prejudice for those. Hypes as well. Journey as well, could do that. Beach, I could do that as well for Tessa Bailey's Michael and Vacation, because there's also a couple of beach scenes in that. Series as well, I mean you could count The Hobbit technically for that one, but you could also count the Juliet Code, that's part of the series. Certainly those anyway. Name, again, there's a few books with names. The Juliet Code is obviously an obvious one. That's about it. So yeah, I've definitely fulfilled quite a few different prompts from Roll Your Next Read, so I'm glad about that. Then we get into the actual monthly readathons. So for July, there was only one that I was officially participating in. Now, as you all know, or at least will probably have heard of, there's usually there's Jane Austen readathon in July. Jane Austen July. And I officially wasn't participating, but I did want to kind of participate by trying to read Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, obviously. So I did technically participate in that, even though I didn't finish it in time, because it is a book by Jane Austen, obviously stating the obvious. So I did kind of technically do that, but I wasn't really participating. I was just using it as an excuse to read it, which I didn't need an excuse to read. If I wanted to read it, I should. So, I did. But yeah, so there's that one. But then the one that I was specifically doing is a readathon that I did in last year in July, and that was a readathon that is based on the last Hunger Games book, Sunrise on the Reaping, and just the Hunger Games in general. And that is Sunrise on the Readathon, and it's the 2026 one. And this is created by Katie Colson on YouTube, obviously. And it's mainly her, but she does get help from her friends, other fellow booktubers and stuff like that. A lot of them were also librarians and mentors as well, so they were kind of helping out with like the Discord and questions and just joining in as well, of course, all of that sort of stuff. So yes, sorry, I'm just writing down the last book that I read that I needed to put in here. I should have done this before, but I forgot to check. Okay, so yeah, Sunrise on the Readathon that Katie did, she did it again this year. There were some slight differences with the kind of gameplay, for lack of a better phrase, from my head. So there were some differences. She's also done a different types of questions in terms of that she did like a basic, like your typical, I think it was 9 board. I can't remember now, bingo board. Yeah. So she did so there were 3 different prompt things, although one of them is a mixture of one. So there was an easy mode where you had your typical 9 board bingo board, and then you have some bonus prompts, and then you have hard mode. And hard mode does include both the easy mode and the bonus prompts. And so, yeah, and she also said in the hard mode you can double up or more if you want to. I did hard mode because apparently I wanted to do that, but to be fair, I actually did essentially all of them that were specifically book prompts. There were others that were not book prompts, so there was a read outside prompt and posters online. And technically I did do those, but I didn't really do a picture for those. And there was also from the library, which is a specific book prompt. But I didn't do that unless you want to count Kindle Unlimited, which kind of has that library sort of process, but it's not really a well, I don't know. I didn't listen to anything from my library. I tried to, but there was nothing that I wanted to read. So I'm going to quickly go through all my books. There are some that I used for multiple prompts. So I'm thinking I might just show you the books and tell you what prompts I used them for. So some of them I used for prompts more than once on the forums. So when we were doing them, we had to fill out a form each time we finished a book. And because it's kind of based off the Hunger Games, we had either districts or specific characters to kind of read for or like vote for type of thing. So there are books that I used to count towards my contribution to the game, but I didn't necessarily use them in the bingo boards. So yeah, but I did use them towards the actual readathon game. So let me think. I'm going to start with just the ones here maybe. So I'm going to start with the Juliet Code by Pepper Basham. I used this for the prompts sequel, because this is book 3 in a series. Brown cover, because there is quite a bit of brown from the background there. I used it for 5-star prediction. And I used it for person on the cover, because obviously there's a person on the cover. Then the next book I have here, if I don't throw it on the floor, We Used to Live Here by Marcus Cleaver. I used it for disability rep because Eve, the main character, has anxiety. Then right. I used it for mentor recommendation because one of the mentors recommended it. I can't remember who it was. I think it might have been Tal. I can't remember now. But basically one of them was actually a couple of my books were mentor recommendations, but every time I would post about them, I would forget to check before posting. But yeah, this one for definite, I used it for that. The next prompt I used it for was Animal on the Cover because the UK version has birds on the cover. I know the US cover doesn't, but mine does, so I'm counting it because British. And then they used it for queer representation because there was a lesbian couple. Then the next book is Pride and Prejudice. Did I use it for anything on here? No, I didn't use it for any prompts on here. Yeah, no, I didn't because I finished this after the readathon finished. So I didn't use that for anything. Sorry about that, forgot. But I will talk about the ones I don't have physically because I'll forget. So My Killer Vacation I used for New to You author. And then Hollow Pots, the third Nevermore book. I used that for green cover because there's a lot of green on that cover. I used it for over 450 pages because it was a very big book. It was more than 450, but I can't remember how many more. I think it might have been like something like 470 something. I can't remember exactly, but it was bigger than that. And that was it for that one. And then for, yeah, those are the other ones that were not physical. Apart from one which I listened to it, Head in the Clouds. But I have that physically, so I will still count that as physical for when I'm talking about these. So my next book, The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. I used it for banned or challenged because of the magic content. It was banned or challenged at one point. Or maybe still is, I don't know. But certainly at some point. And then I used it for sun or moon on the cover because I'm assuming that's the sun. Because it's red. So yeah, either way. It's on the cover, and that was it for The Hobbit. Then I have Nova by Chuck Black. I used this for blue cover, obviously, and then used it for published before 2020 because this was published in 2019, and that was it for those prompts. And then Strange Pictures by Uketsu. I used this for under 250 pages. This was 249 pages. I used it for red cover because there's a lot of red. I could have used it for green as well, but I used it for red. Then I used it for translated because this was originally in Japanese. And that was it for that one. Then Hosanna Wong Uncomplicated. I used this for 2026 release because this was released in 2026. Then I used How to Read the Book by Mortimer J. Adler and Charles Van Doren. I used this for free space. I could have also used it for the amount of pages, but I didn't. I used it for free space. And then Head in the Clouds, I used this for just one prompt. I used it for audiobook because that's how I listened to this. I didn't read it physically. And I think that was all of them. So some of the books I read I did use for the same prompt more than once in the forms. But those are the ones I used for the actual bingo board. Because obviously some of them I couldn't use from the same prompt. Obviously. So like I couldn't use Person on the Cover more than once just because I read Head in the Clouds as well, you know, like I couldn't do that. So yeah. So that was those. That's the only one that I officially completed. So yeah. I did also, for Strange Pictures, I did also use, so the 450 pages prompt was also on the form. It was also put as either a big book, 450 pages, or read a book in one day. So I also use Strange Pictures for you read in a day. But there's no different prompt on the bingo board for that. So yeah, I'm just saying that because I forgot to. But yes, that is all of my books and readathons and yearly challenges that I took part in. It was a really good month. I officially read 11 books in July, 12 if you want to count, including Pride and Prejudice, but I did technically finish that in August. So I read a lot of books. I did amazingly well. Now, to be fair, 2 of the books, and funnily enough they were both the non-fictions, these 2, technically I read them before July. I just finished them in July. But all of the others are all books I read and finished in July, apart from obviously Pride and Prejudice, which I finished in August. So either way, I'm quite amazed. Obviously there's a couple of books I read on audio, which I don't have physically, as well. So yeah, I'm quite amazed by how much I read, to be honest. Yeah, it's crazy. So yeah, just to end it, I really want to thank you, Katie, for all of the hard work you've put in again for Sunrise on the Readathon. For those of you who haven't joined in, if you like the Hunger Games, I think you'll really enjoy this readathon. Katie and all of the others who, you know, help out as well, you know, all of the mentors and stuff, they all put a lot of hard work into it. A lot of love goes into doing the readathon, you know, thinking up all the different characters who you're, you know, kind of voting for to survive the reading games sort of thing, the reapings and stuff. So yeah, if you love the Hunger Games, I think you might really enjoy this as a reading based version of it. It was really, really good. Last year was really good, this year was really good. I'm sure next year will also be really good. I really recommend it. It's always lots of fun. And yeah, so thank you so much, Katie, for all of the love and hard work that goes into this, and also to all of your mentors and librarians as well. And yes, how did the rest of you do in July? Did you do any of the yearly challenges or readathons? Did you do Jane Austen July? Sunrise on the Readathon? Did any of you do it as well? I'd love to know. And any other readathons, let me know if you did any others. Let me know if there's any you really enjoyed reading, any you didn't enjoy reading. And let me know if there's any of these books that you really like, or like the sound of if you've not read them. I'd love to know. And yeah, I think that's it. There's nothing else to really say. Yeah, nothing else to say. I hope you enjoyed my feature-length film. That's about it. As I'm talking right now, it is nearly an hour and 41 minutes long, which is basically the length of well, these days, a short film. With how long films are these days, it's quite short. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed, and yeah, I will speak to you all next week. I hope you've all had a good July, and yes, I love you all. Jesus loves you as well, and God bless. Bye.